Doing a response video. Probably do it in a few pieces when I get time. Play some of this guy's videos. So this is Dinah Cat Loves Me guy, and he's a nice enough guy. So I will play some of his videos, starting about 10 minutes in, 10 to 20. I really don't want to get into a whole argument about particle physics and stuff. Our discussion at this point. There's lots of good stuff to discuss, no doubt about it. I was just trying to make a metaphorical, using the solar system kind of thing, device, just to explain that there's an underlying function inside of atoms that create radioactivity. Okay, that there's a mechanical process taking place, and there's probably a ton of causes that we can't see. All right, we just see the effect, which is the release of a photon. And now you even pointed out, neutrinos and all this other kind of crud, and they might be the real quanta that the universe is made out of, or whatever. I mean, I would almost argue that everything could just be made out of these tiny quantas moving at the speed of light, and it's just a matter of capturing them in orbits. But that's a whole different. I don't want to get into that one. But anyway, the point was just as just a device to say that cause and effect has not been abolished, and cause and effect is what we are. Our will is a product of causes. It's an effect created by causes. It isn't something derived out of some ether. There isn't any kind of metaphorical function. There's a physical, real, hardwired, hard-written, let's say, exposure and experience that makes us who we are. Our interaction here changes both of us. It changes how our brain reflexively will act in the future. It's just a fact. All of this changes the programming and changes our reflexive reaction. Yeah, I guess I'll wait till later to get into this whole reflex thing, but it's really important. Reflex is an important word here.
How do you explain inheritance without random? How do you explain it? Genetic inheritance?
I just don't even get the problem. What do you mean? What part of genetic inheritance is random? We don't see that the cell division is random. We don't see that the components that are produced by the female and the male, and they're combined. There's nothing random taking place. It's all a very methodical, step-by-step process. There's no dice rolling in any of it. There's no poof.
Hurt.
Understand the relationship between billions of objects. Okay, in a bucket. It's way too complicated.
Not more than billions.
But there isn't anything spontaneous taking place, and there's nothing random. So anyway, fuck that shit. But obviously, by our perception, it's going to look random because we're on this very slow.
And what has this got to do with your basic arguments that you're making about antinatalism and economics and all this other stuff that you talk about?
Well, I think it is sort of important. Look, I don't really care about this free will argument that much, but I do care about retaining the concept of cause and effect, and the fact that what we are doing through our evolution is recognizing a logic that is built into the universe itself. The truth is already out there, and what we attempt to do is discover it, pattern it, model it inside of our head to understand the mechanism. And so there is this cause and effect. There's this connection between, you've got to make the discovery, you've got to go find the truth, to know the truth, to put it into the model, to run it efficiently. It isn't just something it comes out of nothing. You have to build it step by step by step by step, and it's all by this very methodical idea, and it's built on something. And so that to me is an important concept to retain, is this idea that yeah, that's the mechanism. I guess it also, I think it is helpful to understand just that you are a product of your environment. Just that thought itself engages a new program. It engages thought programs that I think help you write a better script for your future, in a sense. Okay, it's an influence. It's a cause that will have the effect on your brain of recognizing that your impulses and your first thought and the expedient thought might not be the best thought. That maybe you do need to think about it. Maybe you do need to spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes or even 15 minutes pondering what you want at any given moment, and really think about whether is that what I really want? Because these reflexes, these things that pop into our psychology, do it based on this experience and exposure thing, and they don't necessarily have a credible origin, and that can be detected. So in my opinion, understanding that you don't have free will improve your will. It will improve who you become and what you do in the world, because it will make you more thoughtful, because you will know that your will is subject to bullshit. It can be completely controlled by a DNA molecule if you allow it to be.
Every single one of them is just as valid or invalid as the case may be. Even if we do live in a non-deterministic universe with free will, it's all just as valid or invalid. And, in fact, what you're doing makes a whole lot more sense.
Well, I'm sorry, it just can't make any more sense to me. Like I said, to me, you actually have to expose people to the idea. You have to expose them to the argument. They have to understand the logic to be able to fully embrace a concept. And then if you need 5 of those concepts that will lead to another concept, that yet all this has to be built out of something solid. It can't be built out of faith or intuition or, it feels right. I mean, this isn't good enough. Not for defining the truth.
The non-deterministic free will universe. I mean, think about it. You're trying to get people to come around, and they're only going to do that in your universe if it was decided back in the Big Bang that they were going to do that.
I know, but the point is also decided in the Big Bang was the fact that I would have this conversation. Okay, so I would expose them to something, or somebody else, Dawkins, would expose them, or some other event would take place, and that event was controlled, and that event. So yeah, the fact that it's all been written already, the script is already written, doesn't mean that the script doesn't have character and detail in it, because each one of these little players has to play his role. I mean, a chess game is just moving, forward, left, right, diagonally. It's just simple movements, and yet there's billions of permutations. So that's the game here, is that yes, the complexity of it all disguises the fact that it is made of cause and effect, and even language is cause and effect. The influence of a sentence or an idea or a concept. I'll say it again. I've used it a million times, but it's a great piece of jargon. It's a great little meme. Judge a man based on the content of his character, not the color of his skin. There. Are not erroneous bullshit. What's the difference? Judge a man by the content of his character. Period. Yeah, it's a great little meme. Great little hunk of sententry. It will change people's perspective if they fully let that into their brain.
You don't know whether they're going to do it or not, but whether you do what you do or not doesn't make any difference. They're still going to do the same thing, right? They're going to.
Well, the point is they're not going to do the same thing if I don't exist. Okay, so yeah, depending on what happens to me, there will be a different permutation, a different end result. If the rubber degrades on your tire, the wheel falls off, you die, blah blah blah. The rubber doesn't degrade, you live, blah blah blah. I mean, you can just go through all these little change one event and everything changes. So you could change tiny events. I've made this point before, but there's a kind of a funny Halloween episode of The Simpsons where Homer makes a toaster where he travels back in time, and all he does is swat a bug, and it changes the future. I mean, and he can't fix it. He keeps going back and trying to fix it, and he keeps just breaking it some more. And he finally just settles on almost like it used to be. But yeah, that's the way it is that all this stuff is interconnected, and it's all engaged in its destiny. And the destiny is everything's destiny.
Come around. But on the other hand, you don't have any choice. You have to do what you're doing.
Yeah, well, like I said, there's no choice to be influenced by what you just said. I just heard the words. They went into my head. I have your demeanor, your pleasantness. It's in my head. It twists around. It bubbles around in there. It farts around with the other gear work. And it creates a new me, a new disposition exists in me that wouldn't have existed if I didn't have your influence. If I didn't have this moment of my life, this life experience. Every 10 minutes of it adds up to something. Every 10 minutes your brain is subconsciously rewriting programs and reestablishing dominances and redefining your character, redefining your speech patterns, redefining everything, subtly refining, all the fucking time. That's what we're doing. But it's all done by a regiment. It's all billiard balls bouncing off of each other. There's no mystery, there's no magic.
And there's no point in me talking to you about it because it doesn't matter. You're either going to...
See, again, you have to, the no point thing doesn't go anywhere. Because if you don't read the other script, okay, there's going to be a different destiny. You have to read the script. And the script that requires you to think you have free will. Just as I'm reading a different script because I don't think I have free will, it has changed me, and I would argue for the better. If I could get people to believe they don't have free will, that they are a product of all these effects in their life, these other causes, and understand that they're racist not for any good reason, but for all negative reasons, or they're, unsatisfied or insatiable or terribly, in need of a conquest or in need of a victory or some other, you could just sit there and understand that your psychology is that way because of this crap. And it doesn't have to be that way. And all you need to know is it doesn't have to be that way. And all of a sudden now you've allowed that meme, that single idea to bounce around and hit you in the frickin' head and change who you are. But you can't change you. An idea has to change you. A piece of understanding changes you.
You've already decided one way or the other, right? Okay, whatever.
Really, really fast. And so zillions of things can happen while the speed of light is the speed of lighting. In each little second, there is room for whole complex systems to be created and collapse.
Yeah, so I like this subject, but this is really the place for it. But yeah, I like the idea of, I came up with this idea of like a clock speed. And so if you actually had a clock speed in the universe, that on every tick, things could only change one way. Okay, they can change this amount. All right, this particle A could move this far. That's it. And everything just does that on that clock speed. And then the interactions are just dictated between relationship. But yeah, there's no randomness in it. There's no spontaneous in it. Everything is just following its assigned path.
That's just the reality. A second is a huge amount of time. But we just don't know it because we're big, slow, and clunky. But there's no random fuckers. Alright. Now, even if there was, we've been through this argument. Randomness would do nothing to create anything called free will. So, it'd be absolutely...
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Randomness would do nothing to create free will. Problem is that you people are using the fact that there is no randomness in your version of the world to say, aha, there is no free will because there is no random. In other words, you're saying it's a deterministic universe. Therefore, there can be no free will.
Whoops, didn't mean to hit the button there. Anyway, I meant to hit the other button. So I'll back him up just a hair. I think he's going to say we could... look, this is an important distinction, okay? Determinism, I believe, is the truth, okay? That is the opposite of free will. You really can't have both. You can't have determinism and free will. So, please, let's not really confuse this.
Free will. Now, we could have a non-deterministic universe and still have no free will. That's a separate argument. But once you have a deterministic universe, then you can have free will. And this is where you're trying to take a shortcut to no free will, is by saying we have a deterministic universe. We don't.
Well, that's what we have to argue about. I just don't see how you miss that that's the point. Okay, it is a deterministic universe, and the only thing that's undetermined is our eyesight. We can't see the determinism. We can't see all this, the complex nuance that is controlling the behavior of these subatomic particles. I mean, it is no coincidence that the place that you say the non-determinism originates in is a place that we can't see. Because we don't see any evidence of it out here in the real world. There is no quantum probability bullshitty shit happening on anything larger than these tiny, tiny particles. And isn't that convenient? The thing we can't see is where you say there's the non-caused effect.
I've made this video before, at least 4 times, 5 times. There is nothing. Freedom is an idiotic word. Can we establish this as a premise? Freedom is a word invented by people who were just making relative comparisons. They were saying, hey, I'm not in a cage. Therefore, I'm free. That's all.
Freedom is a word with many meanings and many nuances, yes. No argument. It's not an idiotic word, though. I mean, it is a word that means something.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, though. It becomes idiotic if it means too many things, okay? Then it has no definition, and that's sort of the definition of a failure of a word, okay? If it doesn't have a reliable definition and a dependable use, then it's like, you know, a 4 that looks like a 7, but maybe could be an 8. I mean, what good would a number written so undistinctly that you could never understand exactly what it was? It would completely break an equation if you couldn't tell whether it's a 4 or an 8 or a 7.
A lot of things, there's for people, but it does mean something.
Well, I'm just saying it means nothing in conversation without being attached to a definition then. So if you're not going to use what definition of freedom you're applying in the conversation, the conversation's broken.
Now, when you say free will, it's hard to know exactly what you mean. I agree with you. But we've got to say something, and what we always say when we're talking about this nebulous concept is free will. It's just the term.
Or we say determinism. So again, let's argue determinism again. Maybe that's the way to go and just end this free will crap. I'm just saying that it's, you know, until you demonstrate to me something undeterministic that's taking place, yeah, there's really no argument here. There's nothing in us that comes from nothing. It comes from something. We can trace our behavior. We can sort of see it if we look inside of ourselves.
It's been agreed on. What term do you want to use?
Cause and effect.
It's the removal of encumbrance. Okay, it's the absence of encumbrance.
It's one
It is
definition.
not anything in and of itself. It is made by an encumbrance. The encumbrance defines what freedom you have.
Yeah, freedom is the white space, is what I've sort of said before. Freedom is the leftover when you've taken away, you know, what surrounds either the restriction or, in terms of social freedom, the responsibility. But I mean, in a conversation about our mind, you can't get free of the programming. All right, so I guess I'll end this. I don't want to go on forever. I think I've given a good piece of it a fair shot. I do want to just get to the point. He was sort of making the point that we can't analogize computers to human behavior. He says that he thinks that's sort of a bad idea. I don't think you can escape it. I don't think you can escape the fact that anything that does any kind of behavioral creation is going to be a logic machine. Okay, and that's what a brain is, and that's what a computer is. The attempt is to do logic. The attempt is to understand what the best path is to get to the food without getting eaten, or whatever the scenario is. But it's attempting to figure out the logical equation to navigate, to accomplish something by a standard of definition of accomplishment. So it's intended to be a scheming machine or a logic machine to navigate the environment in a way most beneficial to the individual or to the goal. We can have better than ourselves goals. And that's what it is, and that's a computer does exactly the same thing. It's this idea of creating an efficient way to accomplish a task, and I just don't think you can separate them. Anything that has a behavior is going to have some sort of logic built into it, and that's the mechanism. That's the origin of it. You're not going to come up with an animal that has something other than a brain. It's going to have a calculating device. And it's going to calculate odds and probabilities, and it's going to understand physical dynamics and what it can do and what it can't do, and what the other things can do and can't do, and it's going to process all of that and come up with some sort of efficient solution to the problem. Yeah, they're problem solvers. That's what brains are. That's what computers are. So I think the analogy is quite suitable, and I think the idea that we are programs, you call it a master program, it's like, just use the word reflex, the master reflex, you could call it. The master reflex is just it's just connected to a bunch of subroutines. There were subroutines connect in a certain way, and they send the impulse to the master, and the master will react based on what subroutines have turned on or which ones are off. But it's all this network of things attached and things being on or things being off, and that's it. There is nothing else to it. I mean, it's a processor, and that's what a reflex is. It processes stimulus to create an output, and it does that through muscle memory for us. It does it through psychological memory, through personality memory, you could almost call it. The instinct of how we speak, our accent, all these other things are built-in subroutines that are automatically going to run. Well, anyway, I don't want to get a whole lost in a bunch of that stuff. So anyway, thanks for the video, and maybe there's something worth pursuing here. But I think you ought to cut the modern mystic's a smart guy. Maybe I ought to listen to his videos more than once, and maybe you'll get it.